somebody is pointing a gun at you, eventually it will shoot. You will not be able to identify the point that it finally decided to pull the trigger. And this is what happened in the South as well. Our nightmare here is that everything will go back to normal, except we are not normal anymore. Because everything going back to normal means that we continue to sleep next to the monster.
You're listening to the TRIBECAST at tribejournal.org.
As all eyes are focused on Gaza, the northern border is an active war zone where citizens are hoping for the best, but bracing for the worst. More than 60,000 civilians have been evacuated since October 7th, and Israeli soldiers are deployed throughout the Lebanese and Syrian borders. Nearly every day, Hezbollah rockets destroy houses along the border, and most recently there was a barrage of more than 40 rockets on Friday night. I drove 2 hours north and connected with Sarit Zahavi, a lieutenant colonel who served for 15 years in the IDF, specializing in military intelligence. Lieutenant Colonel Zahavi is the founder of Alma, a non-profit independent research and education center specializing in Israel's security challenges on the northern border. She has briefed hundreds of groups and forums, ranging from members of the United States Congress to senior journalists, foreign government officials, and other VIP groups in Israel and overseas. Sarit has published numerous position papers and updates focusing on Lebanon, Syria, and Israel's national security challenges. We will join her at an undisclosed location overlooking the Lebanese border. Then we will go to the Alma Center to hear a brief presentation, followed by an in-depth discussion about the situation up north.
What are we looking at here? What are we going to be seeing?
You see the Western Galley, and on the horizon line, you see Lebanon. If you look to the left, you see a zigzag road there.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not a road, it's actually the wall. Look at the community there. The last one next to the zigzag road from the right side.
Okay.
Okay, the border goes down the zigzag road. What you see below us, this is a part of Kfar Vradim. The hill here, that's Tarshiha, which is a Christian and Muslim town. Over there, it's the new neighborhood of Kfar Vradim. To the right, just behind the trees, the crowded area, that's Me'ilia, which is also a Christian town. Behind us there, there is a Druze town. Nahariya is right on the horizon line, this direction on the seashore. And Shlomi in the valley.
So this is why I saw all the diversity flags when I was driving in.
The Galilee is diverse and beautiful, and people live together, and it gives me hope.
Wow, wow.
You're coming here in the most beautiful time of the year and in the most saddest time. Because the upper galley, which is actually on the horizon line, is empty. No children. 60,000 Israelis were evacuated. A few tens of thousands more voluntarily evacuated, meaning they decided to leave because it's impossible to live like that. We are in my hometown. We're 9 kilometers from the border. Even though we had some security incidents along the years here, in general, they grew up in a peaceful atmosphere. They hardly knew what a shelter is. Since October 7th, our life changed. As an expert to Hezbollah, I was aware of the capabilities of Hezbollah, but I didn't imagine the scenario that actually happened, even though I knew these are the capabilities of Hezbollah, and I knew this was the plan of Hezbollah. And now, whenever I close my eyes, I see this scenario happening in the north as well.
Speak that out a little. You didn't imagine, you knew of the plan, but you didn't imagine what it would be like.
Yes.
You're saying emotionally living through such a thing.
I don't know, psychological barrier, conception. I met thousands of people. I briefed hundreds of groups every year. When they ask me about scenarios, I talked about barrages of rockets because Hezbollah is capable of launching 4,000 rockets every day. I talked about Radwan brigades, but I didn't imagine an invasion as Hamas executed, even though Hamas executed Hezbollah plan. Exactly.
I want to hear about that.
And I'll show you, I'll prove it to you. What we could imagine is only a scenario that if Radwan brigades are invading the Galilee, there is somebody to meet them. like the Israeli Defense Forces. And in the south, there was no one to meet them. But actually, in the north as well, if they decided to surprise us, we would be defenseless.
As General Brick and you have described before.
And my greatest fear now is that there will be a ceasefire, but Hezbollah will be capable of preserving its capabilities. If this is the scenario, in the most personal level, our life is at risk here. Somebody is pointing a gun at you, and you enable him to continue to point the gun at you for years, eventually it will shoot. And you will not know because the finger is on the trigger. You will not be able to identify the point that it finally decided to pull the trigger. And this is what happened in the south as well. So our nightmare here is that everything will go back to normal, except we are not normal anymore. Because everything going back to normal means that we continue to sleep next to the monster. I have tons of photos of Hezbollah military operatives meters away from me, taking photos of me and taking photos of them. What is going to prevent them from crossing the border and killing us? That's the biggest question here. Meanwhile, what they are doing is launching accurate cruise anti-tank missiles. It's very misleading. These are anti-tank missiles that are being launched hardly against tanks, in most cases against homes, IDF positions, farmers, chicken coops, not enabling the people to go back to normal here. So we can go just over there on top, and that way we'll have a better view of the whole panoramic Galilee and the border. The borderline between Israel and Lebanon was created by the French and the British. And that's why you have sometimes areas that you are under the control of the Lebanese side. In Lebanon, it's higher. And you have areas that Israel is looking into Lebanon from a mountain or whatever. What you see from here is Lebanon looking into Israel. You see a hill, which is in Lebanon, and you see an Israeli community, which is right below it.
How many hours to jog that?
Less than half an hour.
Half an hour jog. I mean, you must be in good shape. I don't think I could do an half.
To drive, it's half an hour.
No jogs.
But it's not, as you can see, the terrain is tough because it's all hills and mountains and forest.
Wow.
So you have a Lebanese town just on the horizon line. You can even see the mosque from here. This is an area where you have Hezbollah there. You have a poster of Nasrallah, a poster of Qasem Soleimani. The UN position there, a lot of Hezbollah position. And below it, you see a gray line. That's the wall. Right side of this gray line, you will see another town, which is not on the horizon line, but it's also on the farthest ridge, Sarit. Every day there are alerts in Sarit, there are missiles attacks. That's Sarit, that's the Israeli town. The line was decided by the French and the British when they divided this area between them. They decided in one place it will be the higher hill for Lebanese, and in another place the higher hill for Israelis.
What was the rationale?
To create a balance of power.
Oh, that's smart.
This was the rationale. Okay, so welcome to Alma Center.
Thank you so much. Oh, it's a very nice center. All these screens and whatnot. This is incredible. So this is where you do your talks and you host groups?
Yes, I think I was interviewed like 200 times since the war started. In Zoom, over here, reporters are coming all the time. We are experts from the zone. So Alma Center in the past year published few reports saying the same thing, that Hezbollah is prepared for war, that Hezbollah is interested in an escalation, maybe even war. We published it again and again and again. All these photos that you see here were taken by us. These are military positions of Hezbollah, the towers of Hezbollah, etc. At the same time, we saw that Iran's strategic situation in the Middle East is that it completed the efforts to build its power in the neighboring countries and elsewhere in the Middle East. And at the same time, a huge risk emerged, which is the normalization process between Israel and Saudi Arabia. I'm referring to Mabas, to MBS, saying clearly in his voice that he's going to normalize the relationship with Israel. He said that in August. Okay? And I think this was the turning point that Iran decided to execute its plan. The plan existed anyway. It wanted to execute this plan anyway, but this was kind of the trigger that Iran made its decision. What you see here in a video that Iran published, kind of a propaganda, that under the name the Joint Operation Room. I don't know if there is a Joint Operation Room, but the concept that various militias will carry out a multi-front attack against Israel and against the United States and against the West, this video represents that very clearly. Okay, and this video was published last April. And at the same time, Iran was building not only its military...
April 2023?
Yeah. And at the same time, Iran was building not only its military capabilities, but also the idea of creating this unification of front campaign against Israel. And what you see in the small screens here is the examples. You see a poster from West Bank that it's actually written with the symbol of Jerusalem. It's written that West Bank is the defense for Jerusalem. You see there a demonstration from Yemen, okay, which is almost every Friday. You see these kind of millions of Yemenis, of the Houthis, going out to the streets. They are carrying the sign of the Houthis. The sign of the Houthis says, death to Israel, death to America, a curse upon the Jews. Over there, you see children in Iraq stepping as a symbol of humiliation on Israel flag, American flag, and British flags. And over there, you see the wall, which is the border between Israel and Lebanon. Part of it is wall, not even most of it. This is a painting that was made from the Lebanese side of the wall. You see Jerusalem. You see the bearded man there is Imad Murnia, who is the ex-commander of Hezbollah, was assassinated in 2008 and became kind of a myth. Okay? And if you want to go, furthermore, you see here a video, it will run in a minute, of a funeral that was held only maybe a kilometer from the Israeli-Lebanese border, a funeral of a military operative of Hezbollah that was killed a month ago by Israel after shooting against Israel. And in his funeral, you see Khomeini, that's the scouters of Hezbollah, Boy Scouts of Hezbollah. On their uniforms, there is again a picture of Khomeini, and they are shouting, these guys in his funeral are shouting, death to America, death to Israel. So from Lebanon to Yemen, the ideology exists all over the region, all over this neighborhood. And the question is now about the offensive plan. Okay? I told you at the lookout that actually Hezbollah executed Hamas plan. And I want to show you the proof. On October 8th, I came to the office. This was the first day that Hezbollah attacked us from here up north. And I entered to my computer. And I remember that I had a video of the offensive plan of Hezbollah, a video that Hezbollah itself published a decade ago in Lebanese Hezbollah TV, named El Mayadin. It's on the screen over here now, okay? And they are just describing their offensive plan. When I looked at this video, it always looked to me like a completely imaginary video. I didn't imagine that this is what Hezbollah would do. Invade with thousands of combatants at the same time. This is what they plan. To start all over the Galilee from 5 areas, to start from a barrage of rockets to all of the Galilee, strike against the people, against civilians. Okay, that's the whole idea of everything that you see in this video. And then invade, infiltrate from various areas, while each force will have its own mission. Each force will know exactly to which town is he going, whether it's Rosh Hanikra or Nahariya or Shlomi or Carmiel or whatever. Okay, and the idea, and it's written in the video, to trap civilians to become human shields. This sick idea, it was not written in Gaza. It was written in Beirut, maybe even in Tehran. And what you see now in the video is that the idea was to also block the main roads, because they knew that if they block the main roads, it is difficult for the rescue forces to arrive. And then also coming from the seashore to Nahariya. Everything that Hamas had done is in Hezbollah's plan.
When did you see this?
This was first published a decade ago. I saw it a decade ago when I was still in the army. It was published all over. Okay, it was not a secret or anything. And I totally forgot about that. And we wrote a report about Radwan brigades, and Hezbollah carried out an exercise and invited 100 reporters to see the exercise a few months before the invasion of Hamas. And in the exercise, what they showed is that they know how to take over an Israeli town. They didn't talk about IDF position. They talk about taking over an Israeli town. So all this propaganda, we consider this it's not exactly lie. Propaganda cannot give us the full picture of the capabilities of the other side, but it can give us a very accurate picture of the ideology, of the plans of the other side. And we know that the capabilities exist. We know that Radwan brigades are well experienced from the war in Syria. We know that Hezbollah became kind of an army in Syria. We know that in Syria, Hezbollah learned how to take over a village, how to maneuver forces and, connect with different kind of forces in the battlefield. And everything is expressed in this video, and I forgot about it. And on October 8th, I came to the office and I opened my computer and I remember this video and I searched for it and I look at it. And even I myself was amazed. And I sent it to translation to English. So that's the offensive plan. And if you look at the pictures that are put on top there, these are all pictures from January, but actually since day one of the most important targets of Hezbollah in these attacks, daily attacks, as I've described, daily attacks here in the Galilee, daily attacks by Hezbollah with accurate missiles and Burkan missiles, which are extremely heavy and creating a lot of damage.
This was all described a decade ago.
This was all described a decade ago, and this is all happening now. And one of the targets that you see in these photos are actually the surveillance measures on the fence, the surveillance measures of the IDF that were meant to trace the invasion. And Hezbollah is targeting this every day.
Wow.
That's the second threat. Like if we have the threat of invasion, that's the threat of artillery and rockets. Hezbollah can launch 4,000 rockets a day, maybe less, more, I don't know, a few thousand of rockets a day. These are the amounts of rockets there. When you look at that, you understand why Israel is very careful from deteriorating into war. But on the other hand, how do you neutralize the threat? So that's the biggest question in Israel now. How do we neutralize the threat without getting into war? Can we do that? So it's an open question, okay? One last thing that I want to say is to show you how actually it looks like from inside. Like, okay, you saw the beautiful view, but this is an auditorium in a kibbutz that was received direct hit, deliberate hit from a very accurate missile that entered from the window, went all the way to the other wall, and the other wall, created a damage. You can see it in the video now on top, created a damage in the other wall and penetrated to the other side of the wall, which is a school on the other side of the wall. So it's all an educational compound there. It's a regional school. The children, again, evacuated, the kibbutz is evacuated, but it's a regional school. There are students in the school from communities which are not evacuated that has to search for a different school. What you see in this video, this is Hezbollah.
And the media, nothing in the media about this.
No.
We hear all about Israel targeting hospitals, allegedly, but we hear nothing about
60,000 Israelis are evacuated from these homes that you see that are being attacked here. And this is Hezbollah video. Hezbollah admits that it is attacking homes in Israel. Okay. And nobody knows when they will be able to go back to their homes because this is a risk. It's daily attacks. And last Sunday, two civilians were killed, a mother and her son of 45 years old. They were eating lunch in their home. And Hezbollah just targeted them from the kitchen window. As simple as that.
And how far away was there?
Few kilometers.
Few kilometers.
Yeah.
Wow.
Few kilometers. Over there, this is a shot from a camera that is based in a vehicle. Shot from a video. That the missile that you see, it's a Cornet, it's a very advanced anti-tank missile. The target was the vehicle, civilian vehicle, and it missed the missile within, 2 meters, and it just exploded a few meters from the vehicle. They were very, very lucky, these guys. This is how it looks like. This is how death looks like.
That has the ability to hone in on a particular target?
Yes.
A moving target?
A moving target is more challenging.
Wow.
That's why they have more success in the homes.
Wow.
This is what we are facing every day. Okay?
And no one hears about it.
This is the untold story of the North. There is war in the North. If people think that when Hezbollah will join in, Hezbollah joined in October 8th. It just didn't join in the way we expected. Okay? We were all afraid that Hezbollah will decide to invade.
Well, that was a really informative presentation. And thanks for making the time and taking us through that. You know, one of the things that struck me during your presentation is that this is something that's happened. This is basically telegraphed to the world, not just to Israel, 10 years ago. And one of the biggest challenges in intelligence is not having the information, but piecing it together. That's well known. What are your thoughts? Now, here we are, 4 months into this major, decades into the war, right? It's not one war. It's been decades of war. But in terms of this flare up of the conflict, what are your thoughts now reflecting and looking back at, pre-gaming the war and then October 7th and now, up until today?
Our biggest mistake is that we build our security strategy on alert, deterrence, and containment. And actually, we should have built our security strategy on the probable scenario. It's very simple. And we knew that the probable scenario is that eventually the terrorist organization will act according to their capabilities. We just didn't know when. Now, it's a huge problem to know when, because if somebody is threatening you with a gun and it has his finger on the trigger, you don't know when it's going to pull the trigger. And it's really difficult. I'm saying that as an ex-head of the alert desk in the Northern Command. It's really difficult to know. I think that now we should learn the lesson. And I think that now we should make sure that we are damaging the capabilities of our enemies in a way that are not threatening us. They are not threatening us the way they did.
They speak about mowing the grass, I think it's called, which is like, instead many generals have spoken about this publicly, instead of fighting major wars like the one we're in now, rather have spread it out over the course of years and, take out major leaders or whatever it is, but never to, to avoid these large flare-ups. As I'm listening to you, I'm thinking like, we've been here for decades and there have been so many times they pulled the trigger. So why is the analogy that the gun was at the head and, they're going to pull the trigger when there were literally, bombs? And I was actually at the Kinneret one time. This is 5 years ago, 6 years ago, with my family. And literally 200 yards from where we were swimming was an explosion of this rocket that and it just blew up. And
yeah, I remember
the
that.
tank specialist told me that if that was on the beach, we'd be dead. Yep. But because it hit the water, thank God,
nothing happened.
A little wind blew it into the actual water, that it absorbed the shrapnel and no one was injured.
Yes.
But like these have happened. It's, that you don't see Mexico launching rockets into the United States. If they did, there would be a pretty strong response. I would assume they're not going to mow the lawn, right? Mow the grass. They're going to actually take action. Like, what is up with that? It just seems How
do you mow the lawn and at the same time bring people to live again under this constant threat and realistic threat after October 7th? This is what changed. Israelis were used to terror. Israelis got used to the rockets. Israelis got used to an unimaginable reality that no country in the world experienced, that children are growing up with the sounds of the sirens again and again and again and again. This is what happened in the South. And how did it end? It didn't end with peace. It ended with a massacre. And this is what changed. So the people that are living here up north, 60,000 people were evacuated by the order of the government. A few tens of thousands more voluntarily evacuated because they can't live here. They don't feel safe anymore. what needs to happen so they will say we are willing to go back. You can't bring them back if they are still under the threat of the anti-tank missiles, which cannot be intercepted by Iron Dome. You can't bring them back if Hezbollah is still threatening to massacre them and still capable of massacring them. This is not an option anymore. Now, I've been thinking about it, that in the past, in the 50s, people went to live in these areas, in the border areas, in the periphery. And we did have terror back then as well. But I think that also what has changed is the capabilities of our enemies. That's the truth. We were dealing with countries that we understood the rules of engagement with countries, with states. Now we are dealing with non-state players, but actually non-state players that have military capabilities that in a way are bigger than countries. Like the huge amount of ammunition that you see of Hamas now.
Speak that out. Why is it bigger than countries? I mean,
because
many countries have rockets and bullets and
exactly
orders.
Not these amounts of rockets. Never heard of a country that has these amounts of missiles and rockets.
Really?
In my neighborhood.
Oh, in the Middle East.
In the Middle East? No, not that it's threatening me. Even when
it wasn't. I mean, in ISIS and Syria. I mean, there was plenty of rockets. What was that? That was all Russia.
No, these amounts of rockets. No, these accurate missiles.
I mean, the planes like pummeling. How many cities? Like, if you want to try to figure out what the cost of rebuilding Gaza would be, I mean, it's absurd. It's just you look at how many cities in Syria and Lebanon that were pummeled by the war. Less than a decade ago, was it? So
what with
ISIS and Iran
Syria.
And Syria and Lebanon, yeah,
and yet ISIS didn't have a state that supported it.
But my question is,
Hezbollah has a state that supports it, which is Iran.
But for sure, in the region, there's been this many missiles and
no, Hezbollah is the biggest.
How do you pummel it?
Hezbollah has around 200.
How do you destroy so many cities with tens of billions of dollars of damage, including Aleppo and all the different?
Destroy the cities is not just ISIS; it's ISIS and the Syrian army.
Well, that's my point. That the missiles have existed.
The missiles are not only in the hands of everybody. We're fighting everybody in the Syrian
war. I'm just asking on the point that you made, because you're making a claim that now Hezbollah has more than all that.
Yes, Hezbollah has 200.
For me, that's just very difficult to fathom, because I see the damage. At least on television, we see, and the World Bank and everything like that. We're talking $100+ billion of damage that has been caused not by Hezbollah. So you're saying that Hezbollah is armed even more than that?
I am saying that behind ISIS, there was no state. Behind Hezbollah, there is a state named Iran. Nobody supported ISIS. Everybody were against ISIS.
But Syria fought ISIS. Iran fought ISIS, and they had the weaponry. I don't want to still on this part.
That's what I'm saying. Everybody were fighting against ISIS. ISIS was kind of alone in this. And that's why eventually it lost. Because you had everybody that were fighting against ISIS.
I'm just trying to understand what you're saying.
And the ruins that you talk about, everybody ruined. Not only ISIS ruined,
right, but
everybody ruined.
The states had the weapons to fight ISIS.
Okay, so the states can have the weapon to fight Hezbollah.
Right, but I'm saying that capability has... Oh, you're saying a non-state? Maybe I misheard you. Sorry.
No, I'm saying United States has the capability
when you say that Hezbollah is armed more than any other...
More than any other organization.
Not country.
And country.
So that's why I'm getting confused. You see where I'm getting confused?
I'm not including Iran in this, but I am...
And Syria as well. I mean, Syria...
No, more than Syria.
You're saying Hezbollah is armed more than Syria?
With the missiles,
really?
Yes. Not with the tanks, not with the jets.
Oh, okay.
With the missiles, yes.
Got it. Thanks for clarifying that.
Hezbollah has very little amount of tanks, very little, and they are not in South Lebanon. Hezbollah doesn't have jets. To compensate that, Hezbollah developed a huge arsenal of missiles of 200,000 projectiles, most of it to short range, 140 to short range. These are mortars, but 65,000 rockets to a range of a few tens of kilometers, and 2,000 drones, and around 10,000 missiles that can go more than tens of kilometers, okay? This is huge amounts of missiles that are hidden inside the homes or under the homes of the Lebanese. That's much more than ISIS used to have. That's 10 times more than Hamas. This arsenal is much bigger than anything you experience here.
Got it.
We enabled it. We didn't fight that because we wanted peace.
So the Iron Dome isn't necessarily equipped for something
It's not
like that.
enough.
That's what you're saying.
Yes.
Planes, no problem. I mean, it's a problem, but we're ready for defense against planes.
There are no planes in the
tanks.
of Hezbollah.
All these things can be defended upon, but that size of an arsenal is something that's been unprecedented.
It's challenging. It's a problem. It's a problem. And the second problem is the invasion capability, which since they are based in the north, they live in the north. Okay? To tell Israelis we are going to push Hezbollah north to the Litani River, this is fooling us. Because Hezbollah lives south to the Litani River. Hezbollah is deployed in the towns where it lives. Okay? The whole existence of Hezbollah is in South Lebanon, in the Shiite suburbs of Beirut,
How many soldiers?
and in the Bekaa Valley.
How many soldiers?
50,000 total, all kinds of soldiers, regular service 50,000, and it could be more militias which are reservists or less professional, few tens of thousands more maybe.
So this dwarfs Hamas and Gaza.
Much more. Much, much more.
Why do you think they haven't launched a full-out attack?
First, I'll put it, there are two answers for this, okay? One answer says they didn't know, that Hamas didn't coordinate the date. There was, as I've said, an Iranian master plan to start a campaign against Israel, but either they couldn't agree or Hamas just started. Okay, this is one option. The second option, which I believe in the second option, to be honest with you, is that there was a decision in Iran, in Iran and Beirut, I don't know, to sacrifice Hamas, to start with Hamas. Because for the Iranians, the campaign is not, it shouldn't last few weeks. The campaign should last much, much longer than that. And if you understand that, you understand that what the Iranians had done was just to say to its proxies, you can act. Each proxy has its own interest, its own capabilities, its own way of doing that. And you see that each of these proxies is operating in a different way now in this campaign. Hamas was sacrificed to be the first one to invade. Meanwhile, Hezbollah is learning. Hezbollah is learning the tactics of the IDF. Hezbollah is learning the response of the Israelis. Hezbollah is learning the response of international community. Hezbollah is learning, and at the same time, Hezbollah achieved a huge achievement, that Israel evacuated the Upper Galilee. And there is no prospect when the people will be back home. Nobody knows. So for Hezbollah, the situation as it is today is very comfortable. There is a low-scale war, kind of a war of attrition. Israelis cannot go back to their homes in the eyes of Hezbollah. And it can continue forever, even though there are damages in Lebanon. I don't deny that. There are damages in Lebanon. There are tens of thousands that are evacuated from the towns in South Lebanon. But this is a price that Hezbollah is willing to pay for this achievement.
So in summary, the blessing that everyone in Israel is saying, like, wow, could you imagine if they had attacked, is actually also a blessing for the Israeli enemy, Hezbollah, on the Lebanese border, because now they have time. They know that it's empty and that they could arguably attack and take over if they were to win.
They have the initiative now. They can decide to attack tomorrow and deal with the forces that are based here for their own reasons. They can decide to wait. And it is clear that at some point, something will happen. Either there will be a ceasefire, and a ceasefire means that Hezbollah will preserve its capabilities, or there will be war, and Hezbollah, as I've said, was interested in that anyway, before the war started. Why do I say that? Because Hezbollah wants to take over Lebanon. The other players in Lebanon became very, very weak in the past years, and Hezbollah became very strong, okay? If there is war in Lebanon, all the others will be gone. They will give up on Lebanon. Many of them already gave up on Lebanon.
What do you mean the others?
The others that are against Hezbollah, Christians, Sunnis, they are not capable of running the country. So even though they are against war, eventually it's Hezbollah. Okay? Now
you're saying Hezbollah is running Lebanon?
Yes.
And they're the ones that will decide.
When I'm saying running Lebanon, again, I know we are talking to American audience. The Middle East is very misleading. Running Lebanon doesn't mean that officially this is the CEO. what's below the surface is much more important than above the surface from the official positions, okay? Below the surface, there is no political decision that is being made in Lebanon without Hezbollah concession. That's why you don't have a president in Lebanon now. The government is an interim government because they couldn't agree upon a president. They couldn't agree upon the government. They don't have a head chief of staff because they couldn't agree upon that. So there is no sovereignty in Lebanon, okay? Now, what is happening now is that there are negotiations. Americans want a ceasefire. Americans want to push for a ceasefire. And there are negotiations. In these negotiations, it is not clear to me as an Israeli, who is going to make sure that Hezbollah is actually disarmed in South Lebanon and that I am safe? On what schedule it's going to make sure? What price Israel is going to pay for this kind of arrangement that nobody still explained to us who is going to make sure that we are safe. And the payment that Lebanon will pay is a compromise upon the president.
What does that mean?
It means that Hezbollah demand that if it will withdraw from South Lebanon, it wants to nominate its own president.
It'll be essentially
And then you can say Hezbollah runs Lebanon officially because you will have a president that completely collaborates with Hezbollah. This is something that the Lebanese are afraid of.
So what is terrorism?
What is terrorism? Launching rockets from civilian areas towards civilian areas. That's terrorism.
What makes it, the difference between a terror attack from a terrorist organization and a country? For example, when the disengagement happened in Gaza, 5 to 10,000 families, Jewish people left Gaza,
right?
And Gaza had a state. It was arguably the Palestinian trial of a Palestinian state,
right?
And that resulted in Hamas
taking over,
launching. It was never treated as a state. It was never treated. It was always treated as terror. And if it was an army, there would be a government to topple. In Lebanon, it becomes more pronounced because you're saying that there is sort of a government that runs Lebanon, but really it's Hezbollah.
Hezbollah is a member of this government. There are ministers of Hezbollah in this government.
But if they're in other words, the 9/11 attack was a terror attack because there's no return address, right? The Americans were equipped for a war with Russia because there's the guaranteed mutual destruction. So if there's a country that's launching a rocket, you can launch a rocket back.
Why do you defer terror from a state, from a sovereign state? Iran is a terrorist state, not the Iranian people.
But Hezbollah is now. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I don't think it was widely accepted that these were proxies per se, right?
But this is the
now
situation
it's clear.
Today.
Now it's clear. But back then, even Hamas was operating outside of the realm of Iran's.
Right.
So
the relationship between Hamas and Iran.
Or are they? But
No.
Okay.
The relationship between Hamas and Iran became deeper and stronger in the past few years. Because naturally they are not allies. Hamas is a national movement that believes in creating a Palestine from the river to the sea, but Islamic Palestine. Okay, Sunni Arab movement, Sunni Muslim Arab movement. Iran is Shiite Persian that believe that Palestine is just a district in a bigger project of Islamic State. It's not exactly the same ideology.
So if we're not really distinguishing between Hezbollah and the government,
we're not.
Until
we shouldn't.
But okay. So then, why is that part of the ceasefire? In other words, what would prevent them from just putting their own person in power now?
Nothing.
So why is that like a condition? I just don't understand why that would be a condition for a ceasefire. It sounds like they could do it without a ceasefire.
Hezbollah,
yeah,
because they do care. You cannot nominate a president if you don't get a consensus, and that's why they are stuck. Hezbollah wants its own guy. Other factions which are against Hezbollah wants their guy. They couldn't agree. There is no president.
So they're still trying to do it democratically.
I wouldn't say democratically. Right. I would say the Lebanese way. It's not like let's put very modest goals here. Okay.
We'll move on from that
it's
point.
Not exactly a democracy if you kill your opponent, right?
So you're saying the Israeli government doesn't recognize Hezbollah as the Lebanese government.
The Lebanese doesn't recognize Hezbollah as the Lebanese government.
Even though they're doing whatever they want.
Hezbollah is part of the Lebanese government. It's not all of the Lebanese.
What responsibility do the people have to stop rockets from being launched from their country then?
Of course, they have a response. Hezbollah is Lebanese. This is what I'm trying to say.
That's what I'm. It's awfully confusing,
right? Lebanon. You cannot. Again, there are people.
But you said the Lebanese people don't recognize it.
No, I'll explain again. Hezbollah is the strongest player in Lebanon. There are more players in Lebanon, okay? But this is the strongest one. Eventually, as I've said, there is no political decision that is being made without the concession of Hezbollah.
So why isn't that considered the country?
Why do we defer? We shouldn't defer. Eventually, we have a business with the state of Lebanon, but we understand that the state of Lebanon is under the control or captured in the hands of Hezbollah. We understand that.
So you're saying that the Israeli play here is to dismantle Hezbollah and then put the other Lebanese in charge?
You asked me about my opinion. I'm not representing the state of Israel by any means, okay? I just said my opinion. If you're trying to understand the Israeli position.
What is the position?
And I will, again, it's just my analysis. I'm not sure I understand the Israeli position, to tell you the truth. But as far as I understand, what IDF is doing in the past few weeks is a much more proactive approach. You see the assassination against Hezbollah military operatives and terrorists and commanders. And I think the idea is to try to get to maximum the achievements, the military achievements, as much as possible until a ceasefire. This is what I think. The question is, which is still an open question, will we actually get to a ceasefire? Will Hezbollah eventually agree to a ceasefire? And if it will agree to a ceasefire, and what terms Israel will be willing to compromise, because the demands of Lebanon are growing as we speak, okay? They want a full withdrawal of the state of Israel from Sheba Farms, which is a strategic area that is watching all over South Lebanon and northern Israel. They want the full withdrawal of Israel from northern Rajah, which is a town that we had taken from Syria, and now they claim that half of it is Lebanese. And if half of it is Lebanese, but the people of the town are saying we are Syrians, so you can understand, and they're all Israeli civilians, you can understand that this is a humanitarian question. They want 13 areas which United Nations acknowledged that recognized our withdrawal from these areas of Lebanon, and Lebanon is saying, no, you didn't. So they want them back. They want Israel to stop the flights in Lebanon. But if we don't fly in Lebanon, it is much more challenging to defend our lives here from the terrorist Hezbollah. And now, in the last week, they raised the price more, and Nasrallah said very clearly, I will have a ceasefire with Israel only after Israel will have a ceasefire with Gaza. And connected, and the Prime Minister of Lebanon, which is not a Hezbollah, complied with that as well. And that's why I said I'm not sure there will be a ceasefire now, because this is what Nasrallah said eventually. Meanwhile, the IDF is trying to maximum their military achievements as much as possible below the level of a full-scale war. As I've said, it is already kind of war that is happening here, but it's not full-scale war. Neither of the sides is using all of its capabilities or even most of its capabilities against the other. But at some point, something will have to happen, either a ceasefire or war, or I don't know, something will have to happen, because it is clear to Hezbollah, as it is clear to us, we need to bring the people back to their homes. And we need to give them a sense of security. And so that's why for the state of Israel, the situation as it is cannot last.
What are your thoughts in terms of the correlation between what's happening here up north and then what's happening in Judea, Samaria, and the West Bank, and then what's happening in Gaza, in terms of like a three-pronged, attack on Israel?
I would even add more. And what is happening in the Red Sea, and what is happening in Syria and Iraq against American forces. All of this together is connected. It's not the same arenas. There are different interests. West Bank is a very good example, because in West Bank, you do have Iranian involvement, Iranian encouragement, Iranian money, Iranian support, but you also have genuine, appraisal and genuine terrorists that were developed from the ground, Palestinian terrorists that were developed from the ground against the state of Israel. But Iran is trying to be involved and to take advantage of this frustration, of these terrorist platforms, of these terrorist groups that already existed, of, if you like, militias that some of them it builds from scratch and some of them it took advantage in. And that's why I've said that each of these proxies have different relationship with Iran and different interests. And again, West Bank is a very good example. It's not that all the terrorists in West Bank are subordinate to Iran. It's not the case. But Iran is still involved in encouraging terror that is coming out of West Bank. And that's why Iran is involved in creating all these different fronts against us in various levels.
So how does that impact the policy and strategy of the IDF in dealing with these threats on every side?
I think that it's different strategy to every front. And it is very clear when you try to analyze the strategy of the IDF, you see that the full power went to Gaza after the massacre. And it is clear to all Israelis that this is what we should have done. With Lebanon, as I've already explained, with Yemen, it's mainly defense, okay? And Syria and Iraq is Americans' problem because they're attacking mainly American forces and very little attacks came from Iraq to Israel or from Syria to Israel as well. So there, I guess we continue what we did before the war, which is what we call the campaign between the wars, which is, you see this by the reports that are coming out of Syria, that there are attacks that are carried out in Syria, by the way, in the past decade, against strategic capabilities of Iran in Syria, maybe also in Iraq, I don't know.
It seems to me that Yehuda v'Shomron and Judea Samaria is a greater threat of loss with seemingly impending war in the north and all the operations in Gaza. It seems like that would be no less of a target and no less of a concern, but we don't hear about that too much.
There is already a campaign against terror that is going on every night in West Bank. IDF arrested since this war started thousands of terrorists. Half of them are affiliated with Hamas in West Bank. I'm talking about West Bank. So it's not that nothing happens in West Bank. IDF is totally invested in protecting the people who live in West Bank from these terrorists, except you hardly hear about it because there is a success. But IDF
there are attacks on Yeshuvim. There definitely have been gunman attacks, and almost every day last week there was another attack. Not even with cars, but with guns. People trying to infiltrate Yeshuvim. So, it seems like we have to be building up troops in every single area.
I told you, I feel we are coming back to the 90s in a way that we have a front. In the 90s, we had a front in Lebanon, a front in West Bank, a front in Gaza. All fronts were inside Israel. There were terrorist attacks. We felt every day soldiers were killed. We are going back to this time, and it's really sad for me to say that because it has implications on every aspect of life, not only security, but also economy, even psychological situation.
What was it like in the 90s?
It was terrible.
I'm not going to ask how old you were, but
I grew up in the sense that every morning we opened the radio to hear who was killed tonight in Lebanon. And today we are doing that with Gaza. Every morning we open the radio to hear who was killed, or tonight who was killed today in Gaza. And at the same time, we had terrorist attacks in Israel. Buses exploded before and after the Oslo Accords, and before and after the Second Intifada. So we suffered from terror for many years. And, we kind of had a very good 15 years, but we forgot that the people in the South didn't have very good 15 years because they were suffering from the sounds of the sirens all the time. And we kind of forgot that we had very good 15 years because at the same time, Hezbollah was preparing, Iran was preparing. In West Bank, Hamas became much stronger. So we kind of lived in an illusion. And it was very comfortable to live in this illusion. Even I'm saying that, from a very personal point of view, I'm not blaming anybody. Okay? I lived in this illusion completely. But now the illusion ended. And we need to adopt a different strategy.
How has your personal strategy, like your personal opinion on the strategy changed from prior to now?
I am afraid for my own security. In terms
of like what to do, and the mowing the grass thing didn't work, right?
We didn't mow the grass. What grass did we mow in Lebanon? We didn't do anything in Lebanon. What grass did we mow in Gaza? We didn't. Even though we had operations in Gaza, the idea of this operation was not to mow the grass. It was to create deterrence. It's different. And it didn't create deterrence because you cannot create deterrence with somebody who cherished death. And we are dealing with an ideology that cherishes death. We cherish life. The whole logic is completely different. And when the other side cherishes death, the only way to fight it is to neutralize capabilities. Again and again and again. That's mowing the grass. The challenge here is how do you mow the grass when people need to live? And they are not willing to live like that anymore. Not in the north, neither in the south. And that's the biggest challenge of the state of Israel now. That's the biggest challenge. We don't have all the answers yet.
So how do you see it playing out? How do you see it playing out in the next year or so?
I think the next years are going to be tough. I think we are going to, that this conflict is not going to end very quickly. I think that in Gaza there is more opportunity than in Lebanon to build a new future for everybody, including for the Gazians, because of the destruction of Gaza. I think that if we'll enable Hamas to stay on power, we're going to find ourselves in Gaza very, very quickly again. So this is not an option. It shouldn't be an option that Hamas will remain on power.
Why would we accept that in Syria and Lebanon? Why is it different? Or is it different?
Because the price of war with Hezbollah is different, as I've said, because of the barrages of rockets. Because Lebanon is more complicated, while in Gaza you only had Hamas and you hardly had alternatives. In Lebanon, the alternatives are still there. And I think that our ambitions should be at least to balance the alternative and not, we don't want Hezbollah to terminate them. If you ask me how it will play out, I believe that if there will be war in the north, the goals of this war will be different than the goals in Gaza. I believe that the goals would be to improve the security situation, to neutralize the threat of Hezbollah, but not to defeat Hezbollah completely. It's two different levels of goals.
Why?
Because to defeat Hezbollah completely is to go to a much bigger surface than Gaza, much more complex. It's hills and valleys and trees. It's not like Gaza, which is flat. The whole military challenge is completely different in Lebanon. And that's why in Lebanon we'll have to set different goals here. And the most important thing, I think, is that in Gaza, 1,200 Israelis were massacred, and we hardly keep the world understanding that it needs to be with us and not against us. And we are now at the tribunal blamed in genocide, where actually the genocide was against us. In Lebanon, there is even less understanding to what we are facing, because we are trying to prevent a massacre that didn't happen yet. And it's going to be much more difficult. And the tactic of Hezbollah with the human shield is the same. Hezbollah is using the Lebanese as human shields.
How many Lebanese, non-Hezbollah Lebanese live along the border there?
In the border, none.
So how far? How far in is that?
Most of South Lebanon is populated with Shiite towns. There are very few Christian towns, and if they are against Hezbollah, I know at least one who is against Hezbollah. They are very weak. Okay, they're afraid of Hezbollah.
They can't leave.
I guess many of them left.
They left.
I guess.
So at this point, like, how many kilometers in is Hezbollah run no-go zone for non-Hezbollah, non-Shiites?
30
kilometers.
South Lebanon is mostly, when I'm saying South Lebanon, is until Sidon.
So that's where all the weaponry is too, probably, within the 30 kilometers.
The weaponry is in South Lebanon, in the Shiite suburbs of Beirut, and in the Bekaa Valley area. Everywhere you have Shiite population, you have the weapon area of Hezbollah. And it's divided. Like the long-range missiles wouldn't be in South Lebanon. They're probably in Beirut.
Oh, interesting.
It's more difficult to hide. These are big missiles. You don't need them in South Lebanon.
What's your take on that big explosion that happened?
This was not deliberate, but it was probably, the materials were probably belong to Hezbollah.
And that was the materials that they would use in these rockets?
Yes,
the same materials?
We've seen that in small organizations, terrorist cells of Hezbollah that were caught in different places around the world, like in Cyprus, it's a good example. They found the same materials in the hands of the Hezbollah terrorists. The same materials.
So that's what people are calling the smoking gun. Pun intended. Okay, so you're saying there's about a 30-kilometer buffer zone, we'll call it, where there's
Buffer zone?
I'm saying potential buffer zone if there were an outright war.
How do you create a buffer zone if they live there?
Well, no, who lives there? You said it's all Hezbollah. It's soldiers.
No.
Oh, speak that out.
Hezbollah is entrenched in the population.
Oh, you're saying it's Shiite.
Children.
That's what you're calling
The children.
I said
From the day they are born to the day they die, they support Hezbollah. That's the project. That's the civilian project of Hezbollah.
Oh.
That's the civilian project. The way
you're saying similar with Gaza, that 30, there's a 30...
Yes, the same way me and you believe in democracy, they believe in distribution of the Islamic Revolution values of Iran. They are loyal to the supreme leader of Iran. Okay, we have videos of children in Beirut, Shiite Muslim children in Beirut, in a Hezbollah school, singing for the supreme leader of Iran with Iranian flags and his picture.
That's not UNRWA. That's straight up Shiite Hezbollah.
Yes.
Not UNRWA schools.
UNRWA, no,
not
it's
refugees,
not about Palestinians. It has nothing to do with the Palestinian issue at all. These are Lebanese. It has nothing to do with the Palestinians. The mission of Hezbollah is to distribute the Islamic Revolution values, to make Lebanon a country that follows the Islamic Revolution values, to make Lebanon an Islamic Shiite state. Okay, that's the mission of Hezbollah. Israel is one of the means to get to this mission.
It's the step they have to step on in order to move forward.
So, and the children, now, Hamas had, 15 years? We've left Gaza 18 years. Hezbollah was founded in the end of the 80s. It had 40 years. 40 years to build and indoctrinate this ideology in the Shiite towns of South Lebanon. Pulling Hezbollah north to the Litani River, which is 20 kilometers from the Israeli border, not even 30, okay, means what? What exactly do you do with the population? What exactly do you do with the munition, which is based in the homes of South Lebanon? What do you do with that? So the only international force that will be effective is an international force that is willing to clash with Hezbollah, is an international force that is willing to go house to house to take off the missiles, put them on trucks and send them up north. Is this going to happen? Who is going to do that?
Sounds like an impossible task.
So the whole framing of pushing Hezbollah north to the Litani River or pushing Hezbollah away from the Israeli-Lebanese border, this is fooling ourselves. We should talk about disarming Hezbollah, not pushing Hezbollah north, disarming
why is disarming, I mean,
because disarming means not the soldiers, but the munition.
But how is that? I mean, if they could smuggle everything they smuggled into Gaza, how is that rational?
It's not going to bring, again, Americans looking for solutions, eternal solutions. It's not going to be an eternal solution. It's going to be, until they, as you say, I think they will succeed to smuggle it back. But, and again, if there will be an effective international force, it should stop the smuggling back. Who is going to do that? Israelis, we are very modest. We understand, as I've said, as long as the ideology is still alive, we will not find a solution. That's why in Gaza, I have a little bit more hope, because we can destroy the ideology now. It's an opportunity.
Well, I mean, that's debatable, right? Well,
if we win against Hamas,
you can remove Hamas. You can destroy their ability to rule Gaza, but to destroy the ideology seems like an impossibility.
If UNRWA will not run the schools, but somebody else, if somebody else will educate these children,
fine. That's decades away. I mean, that's not this operation.
I'm sorry.
Right.
That's decades away.
No one's saying that this war is to destroy the ideology. They're saying this war is to dismantle.
I'm saying it's the opportunity to create
an organization, right?
It's the opportunity to create a different future, to build schools that are not UNRWA, to build schools that will educate the children differently. We cannot do that in Lebanon. Okay?
No chance.
Again, if you want to destroy all of Lebanon, which I'm not sure this is what we want. I'm sorry, there are no quick solutions here, and Americans are looking for it's not like that. And that's what the Iranians are interested in creating long-term problems. So you will not have quick solutions to these long-term problems. It brings me back to the question, how come Hezbollah didn't join in? Why would it join in? If you look at 1973, Syria and Egypt attacked at the same time. What happened? Israel recovered very quickly. It was a military achievement for Israel with a high price, but a military achievement. Why would they do the same thing? It's much better to create a campaign that will last years, weaken the Israeli resilience, weaken the Israeli economy, weaken the Israeli legitimacy, keeping the capabilities of Hezbollah while Gaza is destroyed and Hamas is destroyed, and they will choose when to do, what to do. Why would they go to a quick campaign that they will fail eventually and they will get the support of the whole world to, Israel will get the support of the whole world to response?
People talk about the invasion of the United States, which has been happening for decades, and that it was less a military campaign and more an ideology campaign, that the United States has been infiltrated with a sort of foreign ideology that has created the decay within the system. Like the house looks good, but it's an echo of what it was. And the bones are, infiltrated with termites eating away at the structure. Do you see that long game when you describe the long game that Iran has been playing? Do you see anything similar in Israeli society?
I don't understand the question.
You said there's no quick fix, right? Americans want to come in guns blazing, right? Also in Gaza, Israelis want to come in with guns blazing, right? But the leadership of Hamas, after the ruins, they're standing on the ruins saying we just went toe to toe with the number one military force in the Middle East and survived, and therefore we are as good as Israel. So the optics for them and their citizens is that they succeeded and they are going toe to toe and getting it done. But that's the guns blazing paradigm, right? Survive versus guns blazing equal competitors. But in America, there's been a ideology infiltration where socialism has been infiltrated into all walks of life, and that's just one example of where polarization is. Generational polarization is really, really measurably in an alarming, almost mortal way. And I'm just wondering if similar types of, if you've seen in your walks of intelligence, the IDF and whatnot, have you seen similar types of infiltration and efforts from outside countries to try to change paradigms within Israeli society to get the polarization in order?
I wouldn't say it this way. I would put it on the contrary. I would say that Iran is taking advantage of the diversity, in the truly genuine diversity that exists in the Israeli society, because I think it's in our DNA to argue all the time, right? In the Talmud, we argue all the time. That's who we are. We have different opinions. Israel was born, the independent statement of independence. It's all about different opinions. It is phrased trying to bridge different opinions. Zionism is different. There are different interpretations to what is Zionism. So from day one, we were a very pluralistic society. Our enemies identify this pluralism as weakness. Our enemies identify democracy as weakness. So what they are trying to do is they are trying to take advantage of this diversity and to create polarization in the Israeli society. And how do they do that? We see them establishing fake Facebook accounts and other social media accounts. Sometimes this account is part of left wing, and sometimes this account is part of right wing. Doesn't matter. but to create a lot of buzz and make people argue and make people hate each other. And that way you can say, you see, these guys who are from the left say that. You see, these guys from the right said that. And actually, it's none of them. It's just the Iranians who said that. Okay, but it's not creating a new paradigm. I don't think so. I think it's just taking advantage of something that exists here and making it much more violent and making it much more extreme than it actually is. Because eventually, if you look at the tank, or you look at the artillery battery, or you look at the infantry battalion, you will see Israelis that are coming from different political opinions, from different backgrounds, from different religion, and they have one thing in common. They all believe in the state of Israel. They all believe that Israel should be the home for the Jews and a democracy. They all believe there is no debate about these two values. Okay? The debate exists around what these values should look like. But there is no question among Israelis about these values. And all of us agree upon that. And I think this is something that the Iranians couldn't crack. They couldn't crack that. That's the Israeli resilience.
It's a really interesting point you bring up, because in the United States, there's no identity of, like, for example, we have a Jewish identity, the Jewish state. And that Jewish identity is really the glue. In the United States, it's democracy. Mm-hmm. The democratic society has to be the number one value. And but you see that even in the United States, that isn't strong enough of a glue. And so it's coming apart at the seams a little bit. Whereas leading up to the attack, that same sort of democratic playbook to create that polarization and exploit the democratic and free speech, and seemed to be very active in Israel when you had these factions that were really battling against each other. But what you're bringing out is a beautiful point, that when it's a Jewish state, hopefully the Judaism is able to overcome the potential political differences.
Yeah, and
what are your thoughts on that?
Including those who are not Jewish as well, and they are Israeli citizens. And
that's the democratic.
They are part of the Israeli society.
But that would be emphasizing the democratic identity more than the Jewish.
I'm not sure. I speak a lot with my neighbors here, mm-hmm. And eventually they see in which neighborhood we live in. Okay, and Israel is very different from the rest of this neighborhood, right?
What do you mean?
Flag by itself, which represents the idea of a Jewish homeland. Those who are not Jewish and were drafted to the Israeli army, for example, believe in this flag.
Right.
That's it. It's very simple. They understand.
And for them, it might mean something entirely different.
Yeah, it's a minority.
But it might mean a different type of freedom, a different opportunities.
Yes. But if it was Palestine, was it a democracy?
I mean, when we look at the Palestinian Authority-run cities, and we look at Hamas-run cities, which is also Palestinian Authority, I suppose, we don't see much of a democracy.
I think we should, look at these minorities, and we should work with them to be part of the state of Israel.
For sure. I'm just the question was more directed at the attack from without.
There are attacks, as I've said,
try and polarize.
There are attacks from without. They're trying to polarize. But they're not trying to plant a foreign paradigm. I don't think so. They're just trying to take the discussion and make it more violent. Great. This is what they're trying to do. And it's different than in the United States in this respect. I think there is a little bit of a difference. You know why? Because Israelis are facing existential threat. The youth in the United States don't know what is existential threat. They cannot even imagine what is existential threat in the national level, not in the personal level, in the national level.
I don't know why you distinguish between the youth. I mean, even the talking heads and the media and everyone, the experts 7,000 miles away have no idea what it's like to live an hour away from a war zone, or in your case, much less than that.
In the war zone.
Right. To hear the bombs, to hear the explosions.
You heard the bombs with me today, and they were not very loud today.
Yeah, no, I'm used to it. Where I live, we hear Gaza. We would hear the bombs in Gaza, and an hour drive. Anyone in Gaza is in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, or any of the central It's an hour away. People don't realize that. When you have even comparing it to the Afghanistan war, the war in Iraq, the urban warfare experts who put their lives on the line for the United States and went out there to try to find Osama bin Laden and to fight terror. It's still entirely different when it's literally an hour motorcycle ride away. And
I think that, again, at first when this massacre happened, people compared it to September 11.
I disagree with that.
This is not September 11. September 11 was a singular incident.
Exactly.
Al-Qaeda, nobody thought that Al-Qaeda will try to terminate United States as a country. Okay? This is not a singular incident.
And it was on the other side of the pond. There was an ocean separating, the main.
Exactly.
Could be it's different now with the open borders.
Americans can decide to be in Iraq, to live in Iraq, to be in Afghanistan, to leave Afghanistan. We cannot decide to leave. What can we leave? We left Lebanon, we got Hezbollah. We left Gaza, we got Hamas. What can we leave? Now we left the Upper Galilee. What will happen here? We are very worried about that.
What's the silver lining to end on a positive note?
That if Jews and Arabs can live together inside the state of Israel, they can probably live together around the state of Israel, Israel and Arabs. That Abraham Accords are giving us a lot of hope. The fact that Saudi Arabia was willing to sign a normalization agreement with Israel gives me a lot of hope. And I think if the whole world eventually will understand what is truly happening here, there is much more hope for all of us. That's my life mission, to speak to people so they will be able to understand what is truly happening here and stop framing it as the Israeli-Palestinian conflict or two-state solution, all these charming ideas that just has nothing to do with the problem that we are facing. The ideology.
How would you summarize the problem?
The ideology of Iran, the radical ideology of Iran, couldn't care less about two-state solution, one-state solution, no solution, Palestinians. They couldn't care less about all of that. Okay? The mission of the Islamic Revolution of Iran is to distribute the Islamic Revolution of Iran anywhere in the world. That's it. And as soon as the whole world will understand that, it will be better for the people who are living here, Jews and Arabs alike. Doesn't matter. And I think that people that are living inside Israel already understood that. Now I hope that the rest of the world will understand that.
Well, we appreciate all your hard work and your life's mission, and we wish you continued success with that. Thanks for making the time to share all this experience and wisdom and information with us. And we look forward to better times and hopefully visiting again soon.
Thank you very much.
Sarit Zahavi, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
At Tribe Journal, we tell the untold. You can find more great content like this at tribejournal.org. Thanks for being with us.